Back here on the Herd, NFL draft 1 week away, and we got a great guest to preview some of the draft. His name is Warren Sharp. Surely you know his work. Let's welcome in Warren Sharp to the Herd. He's got the Sharp Football Analysis Podcast. Obviously, he's got one of the best previews out there. Warren, thanks for taking the time to come on the show. 1 week to the draft, which we'll get to in a sec. I do want to start with this Dexter Lawrence news. It's big in New York. All of a sudden, he says, I want out, which is bizarre because they don't seem to have a backup for Dexter Lawrence. And you seem to love him and think he's got like a big market.
I do. He's been extraordinarily valuable, J-Mac, on the defensive side. Not as much against the run. Everybody assumes a defensive tackle, he's great against the run. Hasn't been as good against the run, but his measure of passing improvement, what he does for this defense, is off the charts. I mean, this over the last 3 years, this is a bottom 3 pass defense in yards per attempt, pressure rate, pass success allowed, like all those key metrics. When he's on the field for them the last 3 years, this is a top 10 pass defense in success rate, sack rate, pressure rate, all of those metrics. Even last year, when he wasn't as good and the team overall wasn't as good, this was a bottom 10 pass defense when he was off the field and a top 10 pass defense when he was on the field. A crazy metric here, pressures when aligned at nose tackle since 2022. He has 108 pressures at nose tackle. The next closest player is Vita Vea. He only has 32. I mean, yes, Dexter Lawrence lines up at the nose tackle more than most other players, but his ability to get after the quarterback is phenomenal. And then the added piece of context that you really have to include here when you're talking about Dexter Lawrence is his double team rate. In 2024, no player was double teamed more than Dexter Lawrence. Not just that, not just in 2024. Since 2018, his double team rate that he saw in 2024 was more than any player since 2018. The last 2 years, he's been double teamed at a high rate, and he still has these statistics. So he's definitely impactful against quarterbacks. He's a key asset, and he's now trying to get paid like it. He's not an edge rusher. He is a defensive tackle. But he wants to be paid at above that market.
So, Warren, what's weird is they have a quarterback on the rookie deal, right? They're flush with money. They got a new head coach. What am I missing? Why would the Giants just part with him? Are they shifting out of the 3-4 or 4-3? What are they doing?
I think it's a little bit schematic, but it's also the situation where you've got a new coach coming in. Does he value a defensive tackle quite as much as potentially the old regime might have? You obviously have that power struggle at the general manager position now, with Joe Shane not having quite as much power as he once had there. So there's a lot at play here. I definitely think the Giants would be smarter to keep him, but they're trying to weigh the cost benefit with the salary.
Yeah, interesting. They floated before the draft. Maybe could they get a second and a fourth? Is that too rich? I don't know what his market would be.
I'm not sure there either, because it all depends on, you could see what the Giants want, but is another team willing to give up that? And you mentioned earlier, he's still young, so he's still got a bright, several years in front of him for at least one more solid deal.
All right, so let's pivot to the draft. And we know Fernando Mendoza is going 1. There's not a lot of drama near the top, maybe where Jeremiah Love goes. But I floated earlier, like, listen, if Arch Manning were in this draft, I know he hasn't accomplished as much as Mendoza, but I would take Arch 1 over Mendoza. What's your take?
I would as well. And, I talked to somebody far smarter than I am, Dane Brugler, who writes The Beast for The Athletic, and he did an analysis for me on my podcast earlier today. I said, take every quarterback drafted inside the top 5 since 2020. There's 12 such quarterbacks. We're talking like Joe Burrow, Tua, Trevor Lawrence, all the way through to like Bryce Young and Trey Lance and Zach Wilson. Rank Fernando Mendoza amongst those 12 if all were coming into the NFL this draft. And he said Mendoza would be the 8th quarterback taken based upon his rankings. So not even the top 5, outside the top 5. The struggle that you have with Mendoza to a degree is I am such a firm believer in quarterback and the situation and the system that he finds himself in, the surrounding talent, the play calling, not just the play calling, but the game planning and how you set everything up. And it's harder to find a better team that did it better than Indiana with that coach and that coaching staff. And so Mendoza has been in an elite situation, an optimal situation And so he obviously thrived in that situation, played very well, led the team to the national championship and won. You know, will he be in that same situation with the Raiders in Las Vegas? Is he, comparable to some of these other quarterbacks who had to come out in a similar situation? I thought he got the benefit of the doubt with the situation and system that he was in at Indiana.
All right, so sticking with the draft, you had an amazing piece on your site, and I saw it on social media as well, about processing speed. It feels like it's the toughest thing to quantify. Brock Purdy, obviously great processor, seventh round pick. We're seeing it translate in the NFL. From this batch of quarterbacks in the draft, what did you find in your numbers on processing speed, and who does it favor?
Yeah, processing speed, it's hard to measure unless you're right there working with the guy. And so Sean Payton came up with this metric, which is basically a failure index. It looks at how often a quarterback is throwing an interception, fumbling the football, or taking a sack. All three of those things factor in massively to wins and losses. Those three things hurt teams really to a high degree. I mean, quarterbacks the last 3 years in the NFL, J-Mac, who take 0 sacks on a drive, 41% of those drives score points, 26% of those drives score touchdowns. If you take just 1 sack on a drive, only 25% of your drives will score points, only 8% of your drives will score touchdowns. And we know turnovers are the big differentiator in the NFL. If you're turning the football over, you're winning only about 23% of your games the last 3 years. You're covering only about 25% of your games the last 3 years. And so Sean Payton wanted a quarterback who was not going to make those type of mistakes. Hence why he drafted Bo Nix.
Yep.
And look at the season that the Denver Broncos just had. They relied on a great defense. They relied on Bo Nix not to make mistakes. And they rode that to the AFC 1 seed, a first-round bye, and, a few snaps away from the Super Bowl if Bo Nix doesn't injure himself in the divisional round game. So it worked for Sean Payton last year. Here's where some of these quarterbacks rank in the upcoming draft. If you look at Fernando Mendoza, he ranks number 9 out of 18 qualified quarterbacks, right in the middle of the pack at 9% failure rate, which means 9% of his snaps were interceptions, sacks, or fumbles. Ty Simpson is right there, right next to him at 8.9%. And then you've got other guys, like some of the guys that were a little bit higher up, don't have the pedigree or don't have the panache as some of those guys that we just mentioned. Drew Aller is up there. Sawyer Robertson is up there. Carson Beck is up there. Cade Klubnik is up there. They've made fewer mistakes. They fail less frequently, but they also don't have as high of an upside a lot of the draft evaluators are looking at.
Who do you think is the second quarterback off the board in this draft?
I think it's probably Ty Simpson, but I don't think he goes in the first round. From what I'm hearing, it looks like there's a very good chance he does fall out of the first round. The question is, does somebody come back in at the tail end and trade up to try to get him? And the answer is, it doesn't necessarily matter because you can bet him over 24.5 for his draft position if you want to. So even if somebody comes in and lasts like 5 or 6 picks, you're still going to win that bet.
I saw that. All this speculation of Jets at 16, that's nonsense. They're not doing that.
I think that would be tough for them to go take him that high unless they were just absolutely sold and totally in love. And I don't necessarily think that should be the case.
I would ask who's coaching Arch Manning with the Jets next year, but I don't want to put you on the spot. And, Jets fans listening will get upset. Anyways, Warren Sharp, great stuff. Follow him on social media. Check out his podcast. Warren, thanks so much for coming on, man. Great stuff.
Thanks, J-Mac.
All right. Well, Warren Sharp, you got to follow his stuff. That Sean Payton formula is extraordinary. And I have it in front of me. So Drew Aller came in 3rd in that stat. Okay. Cade Klubnik was 4, Carson Beck 5. These are guys who were super highly touted coming into the season, didn't statistically measure up to Mendoza or even Ty Simpson. Aller got hurt. Klubnik, I think he got benched. I know Nussmeier got benched. Klubnik did not deliver. And then Carson Beck had a good season, but not great. He had a couple games where he was really bad. And again, sometimes these narratives just sweep. They take hold. Oh, the expectations are Arch Manning's going to be great. He stinks. Well, he's the worst quarterback in the history of high prospects or whatever that website wrote about him. So let's not go overboard. If you listen closely, that Ty Simpson number 24.5, guys, he's going in the second round.